Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Global Industry Spotlight. My name is Daniel Crane, and I am the Program Director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship. And we are filming live out of 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Today's guest is Emily White. Emily White is a partner at Collective Entertainment and the founder of I Voted Festival. She is the author of the Amazon #1 best-selling How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams, and hosts the book's accompanying podcast of the same name. The podcast is the #1 music business podcast globally, charting on 6 continents with listeners in 115 plus countries. An in-demand speaker and consultant due to her expertise within the modern music and sports industries, artist development, social media, and beyond. White has been on the cover of Polestar magazine, with her name also gracing the cover of Billboard magazine. Her work has been additionally profiled in Variety, Fast Company, Forbes, Bloomberg, Rolling Stone, Pitchfork, Alternative Press, Brooklyn Vegan, The Fader, Stereo Gum, Relix, CNN, Vox, The Huffington Post, ESPN, and more. I'm really excited to have Emily today. Welcome.
Oh, I'm honored to be here. Thank you, Daniel.
I was reading through your bio and I was like, I could read this whole thing and it would take, probably about 5 minutes, but it's such an extraordinary career. So congratulations, first of all. I mean, it seems like you've been really curious about how things work, and you've been in many different types of sectors in the music industry, which feels like it led up to this publication of this book. But I would love to just kind of start with a little bit of your background in terms of, okay, so I got into the music industry, and like, why did you get into the music industry?
Because I love music like anyone else. I was a huge fan. I'm not the most talented musician, but I think in 8th grade, they gave everyone like a class award, and mine was most likely to be a roadie. And I did become a tour manager.
Right.
So I've always just been a super fan of music. And like I said, realized I wasn't really an artist. And so just wanted to support artists and support where the creation of music came from as much as possible.
And you've built this career, as you said, you're tour manager.
Mhm.
You founded a festival with a really important cause, and it seems like there's just been a lot of situations that you found yourself in that have been new, and you've developed them. Can you talk just a little bit about being a tour manager and what that meant for you, and what you saw there, and then starting this festival, and then kind of moving into creative industries, like you're doing sports, you're doing almost like talent management, and not just focusing on music.
Yeah, it's so interesting that you mention my time as a tour manager and starting I Voted Festival, because those are 20 years apart,
Right.
but they are absolutely linked. I loved live music growing up. I went to tons and tons of shows, and I started interning for the Dresden Dolls when I was in college. They were a local band on the rise, and I asked them if I could tour manage, and they said yes. The first tour I went on was self-booked, but it also went to South by Southwest. And I really grew up with that band professionally. So much so that when I graduated college, I graduated, but I didn't walk because we were at Coachella that day, starting like a 3-continent tour with 9 Inch Nails. Never in a million years did I think understanding the economics behind, the live industry and, really understanding that sector would help increase voter turnout 20 years later.
Right.
But my home state of Wisconsin was decided in the 2016 presidential election by 22,000 votes and change. It was decided next door that year in Michigan by 10,000 votes and change. And I'd read that voter turnout was down in my home city of Milwaukee. And my tour manager brain was like, well, 22,000 is our basketball arena, so why don't we fill it and tie in voting? And so we started in 2018 by activating over 150 venues in 37 states to let fans in on election night who showed a selfie from outside their polling place. And I'm mentioning that part of it because, again, it was just myself and an intern, and we didn't have any money and we didn't have a team. And so I was like, in 2017, I'm like, I just need to get ahead of the holds, right? So I started reaching out to venues in 2017. And we were able to get Stacey George at Live Nation New York on board. And then I can't remember which one came next, but either Peter Shapiro at Brooklyn Bowl and then Amy Corbin at C3. Those are three incredibly influential promoters. If I was able to get one of them on board, I could leverage it across the country. But to be able to say that I had all three was extremely powerful. Then everybody's like, oh, cool. Like if Amy's in, then I'm in or whatever. And then we had the very good problem, fast forward to kind of summer, even early fall 2018, sold out shows found out about us.
Mhm.
And they wanted to get on board. Well, again, with my tour management knowledge, I knew that promoters always have a secret stash of tickets. Say if like an NBA player wants to come to a show last
Right.
minute or something, you're going to have something available. So I said, if you can donate any amount of tickets, we can then run, a sweepstakes. People post their selfie from outside their polling place, tag us, tag the venue, and then they can enter to win. And there's actually a middle option too. Because again, when we got in, it's amazing when venues are all in. Show your selfie, get in. That's what's going to increase voter turnout the most. But promoters understandably, would go back to agents, and sometimes they would set aside 100 tickets or 200 tickets or 300 tickets. So that's why it was really important to get ahead of the holds. And nobody has ever asked me that question, really commenting on tour management and I voted festival. But again, I never in a million years thought my love of live music as a teenager and 20 something would turn into the largest digital concert in history, which is what we did next.
Yeah, and congratulations. I mean, I
Thank
think
you.
it's really important, regardless of where you stand politically, to get involved in
Yes,
both.
100%. We're not, sorry to interrupt, we're nonpartisan, bipartisan. Yeah, we're just focused on
That's
increasing
fantastic.
voter
And
turnout.
that's what's important. And I'm always struck when I hear about creative careers of having these experiences and maybe while you're having them, not realizing the value
Yes.
until later on. So the fact that you're like, I know that the people are going to hold tickets. I know that they're going to, have this and that. I know I need to get a year ahead to book these venues. I mean, you knew that because you were a tour manager.
That's right. Yeah. And you bring up a really good point, like not realizing the value of what you're doing when you're doing it. So How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams is my second book. My first book is called Interning 101. And what you just mentioned reminded me of, I was an intern at an indie label in college, and it just felt like I couldn't do anything right. And even at that young age, I did realize like my boss didn't seem like the happiest person. So I always remind young people, if someone is short with you or frustrated with you, there's like a 99% chance it has nothing to do with you. But I was also splitting my time interning at a really famous, wonderful alternative station called WBCN that unfortunately is no longer there. But because it didn't seem like I could do anything right at the indie label, I asked myself, what tons of interns ask themselves, like, well, what am I getting out of this? Should I quit and do 5 days a week at WBCN? And then, one day a musician came into the label that was on the label and worked part-time at the label. And he asked me to put some press kits together. He was happy with the job I did. And he said, oh, my band is playing, the Paradise this weekend with Kay Hanley. Could I hire you to do merch? And at that age, I didn't even know how people got merch jobs, So it was like a would I moment. And fast forward a few months later, when I asked the Dresden Dolls if I could tour manage, I did say to them, like, I don't know what I'm doing, but I could at least sell your merch. Because by then I had been doing merch for the Dresden Dolls too. And so when they said yes, my first email was to Ed, that musician, because he was the tour manager for his band. And so I said, oh, I just got this tour manager gig. What do I do? And he sent me a list of like 10 or 12, advanced questions on how to advance a show. And I think I had that email printed out, in the front of my binder for years, and still referenced that email when I was teaching mentees how to tour manage. So the point is, I'm really glad I didn't quit that internship.
Yeah.
And I think it's really important for people to remember that, especially when you're an intern or coming up in the industry, like unless something like immoral, unethical is happening to you, if that's the case, like tell your parents, tell your advisors, tell me, there's lots of support out there, but I really think you should stick it out because you don't always know the benefits you're going to receive.
And I absolutely agree. And I think it's beautiful in the sense that, you have to keep, creating new experiences and you'll keep learning.
Yes.
Right. If you're standing in the same place and you're not being like, if you're curious about something, I'm going to check that out. I want to do that. Or just say yes. Right.
Yeah.
Saying yes to something is a big moment for a lot of people. And it puts you in some career or on some track. So you tour with Dresden Dolls, and then you kind of become a touring manager. And then
Yeah.
I read in the bio that at 23 you're done.
Yeah.
Like that's it. It's been fun. So what happened when you were 23?
Well, I was really fortunate because when I graduated college, I tour managed the band. But then when I wasn't on the road, I would work at their management company, which was Madison House, who had a New York office at that time. So it really worked out well because, some people might know, an artist pays a tour manager, and then a management company is going to pay a day-to-day manager. So basically 2 entities were paying a part-time salary, but then I got a full-time salary. But like I said, went all over the world, had an amazing time. But eventually I wasn't challenged by that job anymore. I started to know like venues and hotels better than my neighborhood in Brooklyn. And simultaneously, Madison House had taken on more artists for management. So I remember we were feels weird to say in town because I live in New York and I lived in New York at the time, but we were in town for a show. And I remember my boss, Mike Luba, and his business partner at the time, Kevin Morris, being like, Emily, like the road sucks, like come off the road. And they were basically saying like, we need help at the management company and we need you here full time. And I didn't really need convincing. I don't necessarily think the road sucks, but it just ended up being perfect timing for me to transition to be full time at Madison House.
And okay, so fast forward from, we could spend an hour going through this. I also, just a really quick side note, the fact that you're a D1 athlete is amazing. I have a lot of respect for D1 athletes, and I just like the drive that you have, I know is definitely related to that, because I have a lot of D1 athletes in my life, and it's like there's a certain energy when it comes to how you present work, how you work, your ethic, and so I can definitely see that, like, all of this is like, and then at the end, it's like, oh, and she's a D1 athlete. So you do the tour managing thing. You're in Madison House now, managing bands. Fast forward to so you say 20 years later, you founded this incredible festival for this incredible moment, and then you're like, I want to write a book after writing about the interns about how to build a sustainable music career. And as a full-time musician, I was a full-time musician for 12 years. I still play. I haven't read the book. I'm excited to read it, but I would love to just hear the inspiration behind, okay, I actually feel like I have some value here because I see the gaps, right? I see the questions. So talk a little bit about how you kind of came up with the idea of this seems like a good thing to do.
Yeah. Well, with both of my books, I didn't set out to be an author. So with Interning 101, I felt like we were teaching our interns a lot of basics over and over. So I created for our company what I called the Intern Manifesto, because then I was like, well, then they can read this handbook and then they can, work on higher level things, which they want, and that helps us, and that's great. And so I turned to 2 really wonderful interns I had one summer, and I said, if I turn this into a 100-page book for you and your classmates, would this be helpful? And it was a resounding yes. And then with the second book, musicians kept, and they still do this, kept asking to get coffee and like pick my brain. Right. And I was having the same conversations over and over. So I was like, you shouldn't have access. You shouldn't have to know me to have access to this information, which I totally, navigated and figured out. You know what I mean? Like I went to college when I was 17. I'm originally from a village in Wisconsin. And then simultaneously, the last few artists I took on for management, we were finding money for left and right, which on one hand is absolutely part of an artist manager's job. But on the other, if that's happening to national and international acts, then what about everyone else? So, at the same time, I've been really privileged to speak at a lot of music conferences. And I feel that the information in my book is out there. I've just never seen it put in order from recording to release or creation to execution.
That is such, I talk about that all the time in terms of developing curriculum.
Yeah.
How to stay away from the theory of it and actually like, how do I do it?
Yes.
Like this is step 1, step 2, step 3, because, the idea of it's great, but I need action.
100%. And so I would see artists, in the audience at South by Southwest or whatever, spending a lot of money to be there, taking notes and just grasping at nuggets of information. Like, okay, this is what Sound Exchange is. Okay, this is what PR means.
Mm-hmm.
And so I suggested to conferences, like, hey, can we do this in order? And their response is totally understandable. Like, oh, well, Daniel couldn't come until Sunday. You couldn't come until Thursday. So the book, takes you from recording to release or creation to execution, step by step, literally telling you how to do it. Without, while ensuring that you're not missing any revenue along the way.
And when you were talking to musicians, what were some of the just really common themes that you saw that they just did not understand in general about the music business?
Yeah, I mean, they were super overwhelmed, which I'm sure you can empathize with. I usually would kind of like look at a snapshot of them online, and so I have a lot of social media best practices in there. But for example, if they haven't updated their social media in months, I'm like, well, are they active? Do they
Right.
care? What I've discovered more is the number one missing revenue stream for artists / songwriters is music publishing. And that is totally understandable because when you sign up for your performing rights organization, so like ASCAP or BMI in the US, as you know, it's going to suggest that you create a publishing designee. So if I'm a songwriter, it's going to be like, okay, you're Emily White, the songwriter. And why don't you create a publishing designee for yourself? How about Emily White Music or something?
Mm-hmm.
So I still, meet with artists of all ages and I ask how they're collecting on their publishing. And they say, oh, I'm with ASCAP. Oh, I'm with BMI.
Right.
And if you are not, if you are signed up for your PRO and not collecting on your music publishing in any other way, you are missing out on revenue. So,
All right, so let's stop there. Repeat that one more time just so that everyone knows.
Yeah.
Say it again.
If you are just signed up for your PRO, so ASCAP or BMI in the US, and you are not collecting on your music publishing in any other way, you are missing money.
Right.
If your music is being covered, sold, streamed, any of the
Yeah.
above, which is almost everyone. So how you do that is through Song Trust. Anyone can sign up for Song Trust. You own all your rights. Of course, you can also do it through a publishing administrator, which is totally cool too. But I really like Song Trust because they've totally democratized music publishing, just like DistroKid, CD Baby,
Mhm.
TuneCore have for music distribution. That's all it is for publishing. Now anyone has access to, and it was founded by the principals at Downtown Music Publishing.
Right.
So, they publish Imogen Heap, John Lennon's catalog, J. Cole. So if it's good enough for them, it's good enough for the rest of us.
Right. And okay, so and I agree that, and actually someone that commented, Brian Sykes, he said cutting through the fog for application is key. And him and I have had a conversation about, the explaining royalties to musicians.
Yeah.
How it's complicated. It's actually not simple. I mean, and like there's Song Trust, there's all these Sound Exchange, there's the distribution, and I think for a lot of artists it does get overwhelming.
Mm-hmm.
So in your book you kind of spell out, okay, here's what each one does, here's what you need, here's what you don't need.
100%. Chapter 10 is a revenue stream checklist where I review the 10 revenue streams that are owed to you if you write music, record music / release and play live. And then I also have a list of bonus revenue streams, which I would consider to be like sync, right? You're not necessarily guaranteed that, or something that you have to go out and do, like VIP ticketing or something like that.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm actually, I was talking with Sharon Tapper from MMF last week.
Awesome.
And she was like, and I was like, what book would you suggest? And she said, well, there's actually this book by Emily White. And I was like, well, great. I'm having her next week. So I'm really excited to read the book. And because I think the information is out there, but how it's organized is really essential. And it sounds like from a couple of people that you have done a great job. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
I'm just going to put below so everyone can see just the website where you can find a lot of Emily's work. So I'd love to talk a little bit about your own career. Mm-hmm. So, it seems like you've had, you've had a bunch of different experiences. You've worked for different companies, and now you work for yourself.
Yeah, and I have for a long time, for the past 15 years.
So talk. I mean, and this is the stuff I love because it's like, how did you do it?
Yeah.
Right. I mean, so it seems like you've expanded out of music. You have represented not just musicians, but comedians and sports people. Talk about that transition into, actually, I can build my own career. How did you realize this is what you want? Or was it like, I feel like this is my path? What led you into that?
100%. So when I was at Madison House, this was like, I don't really like the word aughts, but it was the mid aughts. And that was when, everything was shifting to digital. And I was so grateful I didn't work at a label because that was just getting decimated, right?
Mhm.
Everyone was totally laid off. But when you're watching that landscape, it's hard not to imagine, what if that happens here, which would not have happened at Madison House because they have so many strong touring acts. But I was bringing my laptop in and out of work, right? And I just remember thinking, well, if something were to ever happen, I could do this from my bedroom if I needed
Mm.
to. I ended up writing a name your own price business plan for Amanda Palmer for her solo album. And my mentor, Mike Luba, passed that along to Bob Ezrin. Bob produced Pink Floyd's The Wall, amongst a million other things. And Ezrin and Luba is actually leaving Madison House to go be part of a $500 million division of Live Nation that Michael Cole, the Rolling Stones longtime promoter, was leading. And Luba passed on my business plan to Ezrin, and they ended up hiring me for this new division where they were trying to sign every big artist in the world, and to
Mhm.
some extent they did. Madonna, U2, Jay-Z. They gave me Zach Brown Band to work on. That, and going into it, I was 24. I was like, this is either going to be the biggest thing ever or a big disaster. But if it's a disaster, it's a great learning experience. I kind of viewed it like grad school. So it was awesome for a few months. Long story short, we were laid off 7 months into it. And I was really fortunate that I did have some job offers. I mean, Live Nation tried to rehire me, which I felt a little weird about. And then Luba's former business partner, Kevin Morris, offered me a job at Red Light. Matt Hickey at High Road offered me a job, but they kind of felt like parallel moves, which wasn't really an ambition thing. It was more like I didn't feel challenged by it. And there were, revenue generating artists calling me and saying, "Hey, I heard kind of things have gone down there. What's going on?" And Luba and Ezrin sat me down and they just said, "Look, all sides of this business. You should move back to New York and start a management company. We're blocked by a non-compete, so we can't do music for like 2 years. You're welcome to stay with us, but that's, I think they did the Bodies exhibit in South America and some different things. So they also said, if you need funding or anything, we're here." Fortunately, I didn't, because like I said, the artists who were asking me to manage them did generate income. So this was all in Miami, by the way. And that turned into Rock Nation, by the way. That's going to be like a whole other book. But anyway, I was stuck in a lease for 5 more months in Miami. So I started my first management company from my couch and reached out to Margaret Cho's manager at the time. And I'm dating myself, but I said, "Hey, we should do a MySpace artist on artist with Amanda Palmer, who I'm managing, and Margaret, because they're friends and they're both promoting things. And by the way, I'm starting a company." And this person, who was strictly a colleague, I mean, we all have plenty of friends in the industry, but I didn't know her very well. She said, "No way, Margaret and I are starting a management company too. Let's be business partners." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "I'll call you in a few hours." And I thought, my biggest client could sell out like 1,500 capacity in New York, but hers, Margaret can sell out Radio City Music Hall in New York. Like, why would this person want to work with me? And so Carrie called me and she said, "I've always respected you." And that's hilarious to me for like a whole other story that I'll spare you. But there was a big Dresendal show I was tour managing in London where like everything that could have gone wrong did. And I remember thinking, oh my gosh, Margaret's emceeing this thing, a real celebrity with her real fancy management company. But I was holding a clipboard and I guess like, look, my tour managing motto used to be, "It always works out." So anyway, but she said the other thing is Margaret wants to do a musical comedy album with a bunch of her favorite artists, and I don't really know where to begin with that. And I was like, "Oh, I know a bunch of these people. Let's do this." And so we became business partners right then and there and launched our first management company in 2008. And I told her, I was like, we're eloping. Like, we don't really know each other very well. So she ran the comedy division. I ran the music division. I expanded into sports in 2012 when I saw Anthony Irvin come out of a 10-year retirement in swimming, which is just really unheard of in most sports. So the sports division has been primarily swimming because I was on a swimming scholarship and my parents are coaches. Yeah. I also work with Dave Zirin, who's an expert in politics and sports. But anyway, that management company had a great 10-year run. Carrie left management in 2018. I partnered with 2 proteges and said, "I'm starting a new company. On one hand, I want it to be whatever you want. On the other, I'm just moving our music and sports divisions over." And yeah, so that's.
I mean, it's a couple of things that stick out to me, and what you were sharing is like, one, you found the right people
Yeah.
to partner with, and I think that's a really important thing as an entrepreneur when you're trying to build something, is like your team is absolutely essential, or having someone else, that you're not just carrying the weight.
Hmm.
I mean, you came to the board with a lot of
Yeah.
experience and your own clientele, and you were already generating revenue, but to then find someone to partner with, and that's why spaces like 2112 or creative
Yeah.
hubs, really flourish, because you can find people that are like-minded or have their own business, and maybe you can collaborate and create something greater. So what have you found as an entrepreneur to be the hardest thing?
Um, I think I was saying this to Norm Weiner earlier. It's a blessing and a curse because I can't not solve problems, like that's just how my brain works. And it's almost like I get it, it's got to kind of be like being an artist or a musician, where it's like I'm not really emotionally satisfied and my brain isn't calm until that problem is solved.
Mm-hmm.
So I know that's probably not a practical answer, but that's just kind of my experience. Like I feel like I've worked for myself for a really long time,
Yeah.
and it's like my day is not done until the work is done. So I just have an inherent need to create and solve problems and make sure that everything gets done.
And how do you not burn out?
Oh, well, that's gonna be my next book. Like,
Because I think that's something that everyone deals with. I
yeah,
mean, there's a lot of worker burnout, but in terms of when you're an entrepreneur, I mean, you how do you shut off? How do you create balance? I
100%.
think
Yeah,
and live a healthy life while growing. I mean, so sometimes you just have to work,
yeah.
but I mean, in terms of creating that balance, what have you found has worked for you?
Definitely. So one of our I voted board members said to me, "Oh my gosh, like you're doing so much. Like, do you ever sleep? Do you ever exercise?" And I said, "Yes, those are actually my two main priorities in life."
Hmm.
And I was just guest lecturing at a university this week. I have a pretty non-negotiable 2-hour morning routine. And one of the students was like, "How do you do all the things you do if you're taking 2 hours in the morning?" I'm like, "That's how I'm able to do the things that I do." So sleep is my number one health priority. So my routine starts the night before. I don't sleep with an alarm. I give my brain, and I mean, obviously, well, I book my own flights, right? So I very rarely have an early flight or something, but if I do, obviously I'll set an alarm, but that's once in a blue moon. So I give my brain and body the sleep that it needs. And then I have a green smoothie in the morning. Nothing to overthink. I've been getting a lot of questions on the recipe on that, but for me, it's like local organic greens and fruit. But I was at my parents' house and they just kind of had some store-bought celery and some fruit. It's like, don't overthink it, people. It's
Right.
just getting some produce
Hmm.
in you in the morning. And then I move first thing. So for me, that can be like 40 minutes of swimming, an hour of running, which sounds very hardcore, but sometimes it's 20-minute miles, people, like
Hmm.
running, right?
Hmm.
So I swim easy. I run easy. This is all for mental health and to optimize my brain. I've been recording my podcast in Milwaukee and staying at my parents' house in Milwaukee, where it's been icy. So there isn't really running. There isn't always access to pools in the morning. So I do an hour of yoga indoors, it doesn't have to be anything too wild, but that movement is so crucial to my brain. Then I have a healthy breakfast, usually like 2 local organic eggs, whole wheat toast, maybe some avocado, olive oil. I meditate for 5 minutes before I sit down to work. And then I meditate for 5 minutes, really like before writing an important email, before an important call, before talking to you. That's kind of like one of my not so secret things throughout the day. And not that it's about this, but it probably adds up sometimes to like 40, 45, 60 minutes of meditation. So that's
Yeah.
how I do it.
Yeah, and I saw in a reel Denzel Washington talking about how movement doesn't necessarily mean progress,
Mm,
right? So it's like the fact of that you're spending this time to connect with yourself and to
yeah,
be healthy will actually help you, create real movement, and not you're not just busy all the time,
I
right?
love that.
And I think that that's something that all entrepreneurs struggle with,
Mhm.
is how to prioritize what's important, and what do I need to zero in on, and what is the excess stuff that I need to kind of be like, I can't do that.
100%.
That balance, I think, and it's hard because when you're first starting out, you're like, you want to say yes to everything,
Yeah.
every opportunity, you want to meet everybody, but eventually, you need to figure out, okay, like what is the work that is going to get me to the goal. And yeah, I run, and I recently started boxing. We were just talking about Headspace,
Yeah.
which I've been using as well. I mean, it's really, especially with this busy world we live in,
Mhm.
to create that time for yourself. I feel like is really important, especially as an entrepreneur, owning, having your own business, and developing and growing, and staying healthy. Um, the fact of I just want to say, everything that you did by the time you were 24 is pretty extraordinary. I was I was like reading that. I was like, I felt like I was still like learning how to tie my shoes at that time, and like, and I'm like, and then at the end I look and I'm like, oh, D1 athlete. Okay, so it's like, so in terms of what's next for you, what are some things that are happening this year? What are you excited about in the industry?
Thanks. Yeah. So we just wrapped up, or we're about to wrap up recording season 2 of the Books podcast. The last episode is on Saturday. You can stream that at volume.com. That episode's going to be, when do I need an attorney, manager, or business manager defining an artist traditional team? I'll be interviewing manager Aaron Knight. Super excited about that. But I want to write the second edition of the How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams book. We also just launched the I Voted Wisconsin sweepstakes for the crucial Supreme Court election that's happening right now. The primary is on Tuesday, so if you're eligible to vote in Wisconsin, it's really, really important. This has national ramifications because the Wisconsin Supreme Court rejected the fake electors scheme in 2020. So this is going to affect next year's presidential election. Wisconsinites have lost reproductive rights. And so there's both local and national ramifications on that election. So anyway, in the I Voted Wisconsin sweepstakes, you can enter with a selfie from outside your polling place or at home with your blank and unmarked ballot. For future voters, you can enter by letting us, well, I should let you know what the prizes are. You can win tickets to over 30 Milwaukee concerts at the Rave, Eagles Ballroom, the Pabst Theater Group, No Studios. For future voters, you can enter by letting us know which show you're most hoping to win tickets to. I think we might also be doing some work for Virginia's election this fall. And then I'm hoping, I feel ridiculous saying this title, but I'm hoping to write a book this summer called The Emily Routine, about what I just described to you, about productivity and mental health and all that.
Yeah. I mean, those things are so related. And I think mental health is it's an important conversation to have, especially in the music industry, but in all industries, of how to, stay in a good space while you're working, because you have great energy.
Thank
So,
you.
I think that, people will definitely be interested in learning kind of how you are able to manage all of the things that you're doing, and also, stay positive and stay grounded. I think it's not an easy task.
It's how I find my flow every day. It's like it started with work. I wanted to like have an optimal mind, but there will be chapters of like the Emily routine while traveling, on vacation, through grief, through heartbreak. So
yeah, that sounds great.
Thank you.
So in terms of, what are some books or movies that have inspired you recently that you feel are helpful for being an entrepreneur or just being a human being, that you'd like to, just kind of suggest? And I just want to there's a comment from Howard Monk saying facts about just moving. And then in parentheses, he writes stationary at his desk at like 21:30. So.
Love you, Howard. And I was going to tease, I don't want to jinx it, but we might be doing some additional seasons of the How to Build a Sustainable Music Career and Collect All Revenue Streams podcast, maybe in New York, maybe in London. So we'll see how that comes together. No pressure, Howard. So in the college classes that I teach, I always recommend the book Why We Sleep by Dr. Matthew Walker. And this just happened this week. The few students that actually read it say, oh, now that I'm focused on sleep, like I'm working less, but getting better grades, and I'm happier and I feel better. So it's a really easy read. It's fascinating. I mean, all animals sleep and they're exposing themselves to predators to do it. So like that's how vital sleep is to functioning. And then I guess the other, you mentioned film. It doesn't, I don't know how much it has to do with being an entrepreneur, but, and I know it's like everybody loves this film now, but I think Everything Everywhere All at Once is one of the best films I've ever seen. So check it out, people, if you haven't already.
Did you see the movie about the swimmers, the Syrian swimmers?
My mom's in the background nodding. I saw an interview with the athlete it was based on, but no, I need to check that out for
Yeah,
sure.
it was. The soundtrack's quite extraordinary too, but it's an extraordinary story. Well, Emily, it's great to meet you in person. I'm so glad we caught you here in Chicago while you were in, Milwaukee shooting, and that you're going to be going back to New York. So thank you again for taking the time to talk to us.
My pleasure. And like I said, Headspace is working. I love your energy.
Awesome. All right, I'm going to put her website below. Again, my name is Daniel Crane. I am the program director for the Center for Creative Entrepreneurship, and you are listening to another Global Industry Spotlight, a conversational series where we talk with entrepreneurs, organizations, small businesses, and learn about how they are having success, what are they working on, and what are they passionate about. Join us next week. We'll be talking to Michael from Wavelength, who is focusing in crypto and kind of where that's headed, and music. Again, we are filming live out of 2112, Chicago's first music, film, and tech incubator. Thank you to Comcast for their contributions and giving us the resources to put these things sure, and the Walter Foundation. Wishing everyone a wonderful rest of the day, and we will speak with you soon. Again, thank you to Emily for coming and hanging out with us today. Take care.